I'm smack dab in the middle of having two siblings, and we all grew up in this quaint little town. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other, which can be nice, but also a bit too much at times. My dad's the kind of guy who's always working, like really hard, but he's not the type to talk about his feelings or anything like that, and now he's thinking about hanging up his boots and retiring. My mom, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. She's always been the homemaker, sticking strictly to the old traditional values she grew up with. They're both from a conservative and religious background. I love them. They're my parents, after all. But I've always felt like I never quite lived up to their expectations. They seem to see me as the family letdown, which stings a bit. Then there's my older brother. He's literally the golden boy of the family. At 40, he's settled down, married a woman who is pretty, but doesn't really express much of herself. She's super quiet and doesn't seem to have much to say. They have two sons who are all about sports, specifically the kind where you might end up with a bruise or two. Honestly, they can be pretty over the top and a handful. Definitely not the calm, quiet types. My brother sells cars for a living at a local dealership. It's what he's chosen to do as an adult, and he seems to think it's his job to guide me too. But the way he treats me feels more like he sees me as someone who can't manage on his own, like I'm someone who needs constant help and should be super thankful for any attention he gives. He often dishes out advice, but it feels more like he's just rubbing in how great he thinks his life is. He likes to brag about his big house, his fancy cars, and his wife who looks like a trophy. He goes on about his sporty kids, his powerboat, his ATVs, pretty much painting a picture of this perfect life. It makes me feel even more like the odd one out. Growing up, I was the kid who was too emotional, too quick to tears, and always making excuses for why things didn't go right for me. School was a real struggle. I didn't fit in with the tough, sporty crowd. I wasn't one of those big, strong guys who thrived on physical games and roughhousing. Instead, I was the target for jokes and wasn't really included in things, which just added to feeling like I didn't belong. I totally get it. Like a lot of other kids in my town, I have asthma. But here's the kicker. My parents don't really believe asthma is a legit health issue. On top of that, I've been dealing with depression for as long as I can remember, and physically, I was never the kind of kid who could sprint down a field or throw a football straight. This didn't help with my parents' constant comparisons. They'd often point out how I wasn't as smart or as outgoing as my older brother. It was tough, and I ended up finishing high school with a pretty average 2.5 GPA. I managed to save up some money and started college, but things didn't pan out, and I dropped out in my second year. This decision became a frequent topic of conversation, and not in a good way. Then there's my younger sister. She was pretty much the family's princess, and I can't say much about her since I moved out when she hit her teenage years. Most of what I feel about her comes from seeing her as an adult. She's not a bad person by any means, just a bit pampered. She tends to mimic the way my parents and brother treat me, probably because it's easier than being the target herself. She got married super young at 19, had a huge fancy wedding, and now has 3 kids. Out of her kids, the one I connect with the most is her middle child. I guess I see a bit of myself in her because she's also the middle child and she gets picked on a lot. It feels like I understand her struggles more, probably because they remind me of my own. After I left college, I really leaned into my introverted, nerdy side. I found a job at a local gaming and comic book store, a place I loved, but sadly, it closed down over 7 years ago. Despite that, my parents still talk about it like I work there today. But working there wasn't all for nothing, because I met another geek who had big plans. Together, we started a tech support business that really took off. After a while, my business partner decided to sell our company to a larger corporation. As part of the deal, I was bought out with a mix of cash and stock options, and those stocks ended up doing really well. With some smart moves, I invested and even started a few more businesses on the side, many of which turned out to be quite profitable. I don't like to brag about it too much, but I've managed to build up assets worth over $1 million. Now, I'm the CTO of a new private startup. Despite my financial success, I live pretty simply. I drive an old Saturn that's been around for 15 years. I live in a modest 2-bedroom house in a nice area, and all my furniture is secondhand. I'm still single, I regularly see a therapist, and I stay pretty busy. One of my ongoing challenges is battling alcoholism, which is tough because just like with my asthma and depression, my parents don't really believe it's real. They think it's all in my head. So while my life has had its ups and downs, I've managed to carve out a path for myself that works, even if it's not what everyone else might expect or understand. My parents have this expectation that I should be at their place for dinner every Sunday, but it's not just a quick trip. They live on the other end of the state, so we're talking about a 90 to 120-minute drive each way. That pretty much eats up half of my weekend. Despite this, they seem to think that being single and what my brother likes to label as a mental case, I wouldn't have anything better to do with my time. These dinners can be a real trial. I sit there for 3 hours listening to forced compliments about my brother's latest big sale at the car dealership, or getting unsolicited advice on how I should grow up, get married, and be a proper adult. If I ever miss one of these dinners, it's guaranteed to be the main topic of conversation at the next one. Although they've never outright called me a moocher, the implication hangs in the air, which is both confusing and frustrating. Honestly, I often find myself questioning why I keep going to these dinners when I talk to my therapist. Any success I've achieved is either minimized or twisted into something negative by my family. Until very recently, everyone back home still thought I was working at the now-closed gaming store. My past retail job was always looked down on compared to my brother's supposedly more adult, outgoing, and successful career. This contrast made it tough to share the true state of my life and successes with anyone from back home. In my family, games and comics were always brushed off as childish hobbies. Whenever I tried to bring up technology, a field I'm actually an expert in, my brother would talk over me as if I didn't know a thing. I usually just let him ramble on. It was clear to me that he was spouting nonsense, but I was hesitant to call him out. I didn't want to have to explain my expertise, which would inevitably lead to explaining more about what I do. Deep down, I think I was scared that they wouldn't take my career seriously, and it might change how they saw everything about me. It's fair to say, I've been a bit of a mess. However, everything changed last month. Somehow, my brother got his hands on some of my personal information. He actually hired a private investigator to run what he claimed was an employer background check on me. I suspect he and my parents were planning some kind of intervention. What they discovered completely blindsided them. They found out about my actual net worth, that I wasn't living in some rundown place, and other personal details I'd kept private, especially because my work involves security. I even got alerts about some unauthorized attempts to pull my credit report. After putting two and two together, I figured out what had happened. This revelation has forced everything into the open, and now I have to navigate this unexpected shift in how my family views me. It's a lot to process, especially considering the underestimation and misunderstandings that have been part of my relationship with them for so long. I was so furious about the breach of my privacy that I ended up hiring the same private investigator agency to dig into my family's finances. It turns out my brother was living far beyond his means. The investigation revealed several past arrests for DWI and public drunkenness, along with domestic disturbance calls and a file with Child Protective Services, although no current charges were active. He was also struggling with scheduled IRS back payments and was juggling 3 mortgage loans on his house. His credit was a disaster. In contrast, my parents lived modestly, with very little to their names beyond what I already knew, practical and quite sensible financially. I didn't even bother to check up on my sister. When I showed up at the next family dinner, I was ready to confront them, potentially burning some bridges. However, the atmosphere I walked into was unexpectedly different. My parents began treating me with a kind of awkward reverence, as if I had suddenly become the golden child. This shift made my brother visibly agitated. Halfway through dinner, he lost his composure. In an attempt to regain some ground, he started boasting about recent sales commissions and a supposed promotion. I simply acknowledged these achievements, subtly reminding him of his IRS troubles, the loans, and his stretched credit situation, essentially acknowledging the good while highlighting the reality of his financial mess. The whole situation was strangely depressing. The sudden change in my parents' behavior towards me felt insincere and forced, turning what was already a tense family dynamic into something even more uncomfortable. E denied everything initially, but when I handed him a copy of the report, I pointed out that he was the one who inadvertently recommended the agency by using it to investigate me. I must admit, there was a brief moment where that felt satisfying. My parents reacted with dramatic surprise, scolding him, but it was clear they were in on it too. They had to have provided my social security number for him to get the report. The whole scene was profoundly unsettling. There was no pleasure in the revelation or the ensuing argument. It crystallized my disdain for my family, highlighting their greed and cowardice. Over the next hour, as accusations flew, they started throwing each other under the bus, while I tried to stay as quiet as possible. Occasionally, they turned their frustration towards me, and I responded with nonchalant one-word answers or just shrugged. Meanwhile, my sister, her husband, my brother's wife, and all 5 kids sat there dumbfounded, witnessing a family unraveling like never before. Usually our gatherings are mundane and predictable. My mother would start the conversation, my father would interject with grunts, my brother and his wife would boast about their lives, and my sister would share updates whenever she could. This breakdown was unlike anything our family dinners had ever seen, leaving everyone at the table in shocked silence, grappling with the sudden exposure of deep-seated issues that had long been simmering beneath the surface of our familial relations. The family dinner was tumultuous, to say the least. Alongside the usual subtle jabs about how I should look up to my brother and be a real man, the conversation spiraled into a loud, heated debate among my mom, dad, and brother. They dredged up every piece of old family drama, stuff from 20, 30 years ago, arguing over whose fault everything was. It was like watching everything unravel in real time, a total free-for-all. Every negative feeling I had harbored about my family seemed to be validated in those moments. You might think I'd feel some sense of triumph or justice, but honestly, I just felt terrible. I realized I might not have handled the situation well. I knew they weren't great people, but what did I really hope to gain by exposing my brother's misdeeds? Now his kids were aware of his past, which wasn't something I had intended to happen. The evening came to a head when my brother, red-faced with fury, lashed out at me. He blamed me for all the family's problems, culminating in the harsh words, "You should have never been born." That moment was shocking, not just because of his words, but because I saw my parents trying to quiet him down, a panic move I had never witnessed before. Despite their attempts to intervene, they never really acknowledged their own role in how they had treated me over the years. It was a stark, painful reminder of the deep issues in our family dynamics, leaving me with a mix of vindication and profound sadness. When I couldn't take it anymore, I stood up and announced that I was done with these dinners and wouldn't be coming back. That's when my parents threw another accusation my way. They claimed I was withholding help from a niece or nephew who had some ailment, suggesting that I could have fixed it but chose to ignore it. This was news to me. I had never been made aware of any such issue, nor had anyone reached out to me for help. I suspect they might have been making it up right there on the spot, but I didn't challenge it. Instead, I reminded them, "I thought you believed I still worked at a comic book store." That place hadn't been in business since 2011, a fact I'd mentioned more than once, but they never seemed to grasp. The way they had rewritten our family history was not only appalling, but downright embarrassing. Overwhelmed and frustrated, I just walked out and drove home. Now I'm left with mixed feelings. On one hand, I feel violated that they know about my financial worth, which I'm sure will lead to pressure to pay them back, especially since I've seen them do the same with my brother. On the other hand, I do acknowledge and appreciate that my parents provided for my basic needs, food, water, and shelter, during my upbringing. It's a complex tangle of gratitude, resentment, and newfound boundaries that I'll need to navigate carefully, especially as they now have expectations linked to my financial success. This dynamic shift is something I'll likely be unpacking for some time, possibly with the help of my therapist. It's clear that setting firm boundaries will be crucial moving forward. Honestly, I wasn't really the favorite kid in my family. Growing up was tough in that way. Even though my parents never hit me, they didn't do much to stop my brother when he was mean to me. He used to punch, kick, and say really hurtful things to me, and my parents just ignored it, pretending it wasn't happening. They don't even believe that being mean with words, that's what I mean by verbal A, is an actual bad thing. But it really hurt. After dealing with this for so long, I've reached a point where I just can't do it anymore. I still know they're my family, but I feel like I need to step away from them for good. I don't wish them anything bad. I just think it's better for me to not be around them anymore and start a new chapter on my own. Now looking ahead, I wonder what will happen if I meet someone special, like a girlfriend, and we decide to get married and have kids. How will I handle things with my family then? It's something I'm trying to figure out because it could get pretty complicated. How do I introduce my new family to my old family if I'm not really talking to them anymore? That's a big question on my mind. Now for the comment before reading the update. Go. No contact. The only reason they wanted you around before was so they could belittle you to make themselves feel good. And the only reason they want you around now is to get some of your money. Your family is no reflection of you, frankly. They all suck. You are not a loser. You actually sound like a pretty neat person who got the wrong end of the deal when it came to family. Block their numbers and go live your life without them. I think you did an outstanding job. Lower your contact with your family as much as you like. They are only after your money, so you don't have to have anything to do with them on anything but your own terms. Keep talking to your therapist to help you move into a life without them dragging you down. Go. No contact? Absolutely. If you can pack your things and move to a new city for a fresh start regarding dating, lots of people are estranged from their families. It can be weird to explain to a potential partner, especially if their familial ties are strong. But you certainly are not the first person who has had to take drastic steps like this. You will build a new family when the time is right. In the meantime, there are a couple of things I think you should do. if you haven't already put a security freeze on your credit accounts. If your brother used resources from the car dealership to pull this info on you, you may want to consider telling them. I don't think they would be pleased to hear they were complicit in fraud. Also, get a lawyer. You are young, but catastrophes happen, and currently your parents are next of kin by default and will inherit everything. Maybe you don't care about that, but if you would prefer to see your assets, go to someone else. Get it in writing as soon as possible. Lastly, find a good counselor. You may experience some grief in the coming months, and it will be helpful to talk through it with a professional. Update. Man, after that epic showdown at dinner, driving back home felt like escaping a battlefield. The road was quiet, just me and my thoughts buzzing through the night. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I knew something had to change. I couldn't keep doing these family dinners, not without losing my sanity. Over the next few weeks, I kept to myself, focusing on work and my own peace of mind. The comic books and tech gadgets around my house weren't just distractions, they were my sanctuary. I ramped up my therapy sessions too, hashing out ways to keep my family at arm's length without cutting them out completely. My therapist, Dr. Bennett, was a lifesaver, talking me through strategies for setting boundaries that felt more like building a fort than putting up a wall. As the weather warmed up, my mind started wandering to the future, particularly about relationships. I'd been single for a while, focusing on myself, but the idea of meeting someone special started to feel not just possible, but likely. And then, just like something out of a comic book, Eva walked into my life. We met at a tech conference. She was giving a talk on cybersecurity, and I was hooked not just by the topic, but by her charisma. She was brilliant, grounded, and she got me. She also had this way of seeing family that was all about love, but with boundaries like steel. As things with Ava got serious, the elephant in the room was how to introduce her to my family circus. We spent many nights talking over pizza about how to handle it. We agreed on a game plan: keep family meetups light, public, and short. Eva was on board to back me up, which was a game changer. We started with coffee meetups. I reintroduced myself to the family gatherings, this time with Eva. Predictably, the first couple of times were awkward as heck. My parents were overly polite, tiptoeing around me like I might bolt at any second. And my brother, well, he looked like he wanted to say a million things but couldn't get the words out. My sister and her kids, though, were a breath of fresh air. Her middle kid, who reminded me so much of myself, took an instant liking to Eva. These coffee dates became our thing. They were like short expeditions into family land, quick in, quick out. It let me reconnect without drowning in the drama, and surprisingly, it started to work. My family slowly got used to this new setup. They began to respect my boundaries, maybe realizing that this was the only way to keep me in their lives. As Eva and I grew closer, I started thinking more about the long term. What would our future look like? I could see us building something solid, a family built on respect and love, not obligation and guilt. But I knew the road wouldn't be all smooth sailing. One summer evening, as Eva and I were walking by the lake, talking about maybe moving in together, I realized how far I'd come. From feeling like the family letdown to standing on my own with someone who truly got me, it was like night and day. Looking ahead, I'm cautiously optimistic. I know there'll be bumps down the road. Heck, maybe some potholes the size of craters. But with Ava, I feel ready for it. Setting those boundaries with my family wasn't just about protecting myself. It was about making room for new relationships, for a future where I could be happy. And as for those Sunday dinners, well, they're still on the calendar, but now they're on my terms. Sometimes I go, sometimes I don't. When I do, I bring Eva, and together, we handle whatever comes our way. It's not perfect, but it's a whole lot better. It's about finding that balance, you know? Keeping the peace without losing myself in the process. Story 2. Hey everyone, I'm pretty new to sharing my stuff online, so go easy on me. I want to tell you about what's happening in my life because it's a lot to handle right now. Let's start with the main people involved. There's me, my soon-to-be ex-wife Daisy, our daughter Peach, and our son Mario. We're right in the middle of a tough separation that's quickly turning into a pretty brutal divorce. So here's the story. Daisy and I are going our separate ways mainly because she realized earlier this year that she's bisexual. She came out and told me she wanted us to have an open marriage. I wasn't comfortable with that idea at all. The situation got even more complicated when I found out that Daisy had slept with my work partner, who also happens to be one of my closest friends. I'm a cop, so you can imagine how awkward and painful that was. It felt like a double betrayal, both at home and at work. After that, we just couldn't stay together, and I ended up taking some time off to get my head straight. Initially, Daisy tried hard to keep us together. She pleaded and argued that we could make it work, but when it became clear that I was firm on not opening up our marriage, things took a nasty turn. Daisy's attitude changed completely. She started to act out of spite, and things got really ugly. She began using our kids as pawns in this whole mess, which is the last thing I wanted. Daisy started telling Peach that the reason she had to leave our home was that I didn't love them anymore, that I was breaking up our family because I hated them. It was heartbreaking to hear, especially knowing how confused and sad it must make Peach feel. Right now, Daisy is living at her mom's house, and our kids visit her there. During these visits, Daisy and her new partner try to make everything seem like a big fun vacation. They shower Peach and Mario with gifts and treats, probably trying to turn them against me by playing the cool parents. Besides all the emotional drama, Daisy is fighting me on every single practical issue too. We're clashing over everything: how much money one should support the other with, who should get what from our belongings, and the hardest part, how we're going to split our time with Peach and Mario. She disagrees with every agreement we try to set up, and it feels like she's just doing it to make things as hard as possible. Recently, Daisy, who's going to be my ex-wife, has been making things a bit complicated. She's been telling our kids things that make me seem like the bad guy, which isn't fair at all. For example, Peach and Mario started asking me if I don't like Daisy's new friend, let's call them AP, or why it seems like AP loves them more than I do. This kind of talk really messes with their heads. A couple of weeks ago, I was working on something big at my job. I'm a cop, and I was trying to get promoted to homicide detective, which requires a lot of extra hours. So Daisy and I agreed that the kids would stay with her during this busy time and I'd visit on the weekends. When it was time for them to go to Daisy's, I packed up a big bag for Mario. As I handed him the bag, he looked at me with tears in his eyes and asked, "Are you sending us away because you hate us like Mommy says?" That moment was heart-wrenching. I hugged him tight and reassured him that I loved him very much, and it wasn't true. Despite my efforts, things were still awkward when I went to see them. Last weekend, when I visited, it was really tough. They barely spoke to me. It seemed like they didn't even want to see me, which hurt a lot. I had to wait until today to get another chance to talk with them. When I picked them up, both of them looked really sad. I managed to have a chat with them, and it was clear that Peach, especially, is having a hard time. She still loves me, but it feels like Daisy is making it hard for her to show it. It's a tricky situation, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to handle it so that it doesn't hurt the kids too much. It's tough when things get twisted like this in a family. She feels like she's not allowed to love me, and it's really hurting her. I can't let my princess go through this anymore. They are being actively hurt by this divorce, and now I'm questioning it. Should I continue with the divorce? Is there a way to proceed and spare my kids? Should I suck it up and stay? Now for the comment. You need to tell all of this to your divorce attorney immediately. This is parental alienation, and a judge will almost certainly order a stop to it. But that order will be hard to enforce, so you need to jump on this ASAP and then stay on it. Daisy is a very bad person. Document everything and definitely divorce her. Things will not get better. If you stay, they will get worse. Dude, this is parental alienation, and a big reason why my friend got custody of his kid because his ex-wife was doing this crap. Document and get your attorney on this pronto. Also, therapy for the kiddos. Your ex is a horrible human. Do not let her have your kids anymore. Tell your lawyer what she's doing and let him know that your kids are not seeing their mother without supervision. I would also call CPS and let them know what your ex is doing to your kids. And for the love of your kids, do not get back with her.